First of all, I just want to say thank you for having us have this talk in this incredible building. I feel really honored to be talking here.
Yeah, very privileged. I was speaking about it earlier today. I was thinking like, wow, we're in this building in competition with Brancusi, in competition with the sun, which is a rare thing in Berlin. So I'm really grateful that so many of you are joining us, despite everything that you could be doing during this time. And and I'm also really privileged not only to be sitting here at Neue Nationalgalerie, but also to be sitting with you, Ketuta, because we were speaking about this yesterday. That actually we've known each other from like openings and saying hi to each other, but we rarely actually had the chance to speak about your work. And I've been so intrigued by it for many years. So I was really happy to receive this invitation to speak with you in the public. So. The talk will be basically, we're going to go through some of Ketuta's projects in recent time, and also, of course, we're going to end at her exhibition at Galerie Molitor, so give you like a bit of a sneak preview of what you are going to see there tonight or over the course of this weekend or over the course of the next weeks. And there's something that has been mentioned just shortly before, which is that Ketuta works with photography that does not use camera. And there is something that I think will recur throughout our conversation that is very special about your approach with photography. But so one thing that I was thinking about while actually looking at the image that you see in front of us is this is a work that has been presented at the Van Abbe Museum. But this very image is actually one where one sees you. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And the other images you will see in this presentation are, very clean install views. But I was wondering if you could speak about the fact that you actually took this photograph.
Yes, sometimes I get kind of frustrated with the installation images of shows because they look so impersonal in a way. And since in order to make the installation shots, you use photography, I had decided at some point, let me document my own shows also on analog film. And in a way, I'm always looking for something really subjective in photography. And that was a continuation of it. So this is my installation picture of the installation at Van Abbe Museum, where you see my reflection. So, yeah.
So do you photograph all of your exhibitions also in analog? You have 2 folders?
Yeah.
Really? Oh, wow.
I mean, I started about 2 years ago. I didn't always do it, unfortunately, but I started about 2 years ago, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
I would ideally love to do a book of installation shots that I've done of my shows.
Yeah. And then you also develop them yourself?
No, I take them to Photocopy on
because there's speaking perhaps about photography, there was in general, before we really dive into the work, there was last year in November there was an issue of art forum, and there was a conversation that was hosted at Paris Photo with Pablo Larios, actually also a former colleague of mine at Frieze, where it was about the materiality of photography and where do we go from here. I believe was together with the curator Florian Ebner, who works at the Centre Pompidou, and with Jeff Wall and yourself. So a really prestigious roundtable, and there was something that you mentioned actually in that conversation, which I read back then. Which I thought was really interesting, because you said that during the pandemic you were more and more intrigued to return back to analog, or that you've always been living between these two worlds, but with the pandemic that this really shifted your attention back to something that is not digital. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
During that talk, one question that was posed to Jeff Wall was what do you think about AI and photography? And he said, of course, or AI and art, and he said, of course, people will start making work with AI, 100%, and it's going to be really good work. It's just a matter of deciding how you want to engage with the world. Do you want to engage with it kind of physically and in an analog way, or do you want to engage with it digitally? So I feel I had this feeling during COVID where my husband, who's an artist, he could draw and just go to the studio and draw, and I was so relying on all these kind of technologies, So I started, my first step to analog was that I started taking Polaroids, because you could just get Polaroid film, you could develop it yourself, you didn't need to use a lab and so on. And also I had this moment where I thought, I'm spending all this time on the screen, I'm photoshopping, printing, I would like to kind of, in a way, go back to the darkroom. And at that time, kind of luckily, Susanne Kreeman, who's here, and she teaches in Karlsruhe, she invited me to teach a semester. And the students were really interested in learning analog printing. So actually, the students brought me back to the analog lab.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Probably one would like assume it would be different, but
yeah. And then I went to Go Lab, which is where I made the analog prints, and with Susanna, who's where is she? Yeah. Also here, we started working on analog prints again, and I also would love to go in and just do them myself, and that's like a plan now for the next project that I'm doing.
But as you can see on this image, Ketuta does not only also work with analog photography and just like printing them on paper, but you also like work a lot with like how one can also like exceed and break with the limits of photography. And I was wondering if you could speak about this paravent that you created for your show at the Van Abbe Museum, because the tulip holds a very significant, it's a very like a significance and meaning in Georgia. And I was wondering if you could speak about that.
The show actually opened on April 9th last spring, and I think it was a 29-year anniversary of a massacre in Tbilisi, Georgia, where students were protesting for independence of Georgia, and tanks from the Russian army kind of rolled in the middle of the night, and I think about 30 people were killed. And since it was spring, and it was actually one of these few events that snowballed into, I would say, Soviet Union breaking apart, because this violence of the Soviet state was really kind of on display publicly. And since it was spring and tulips were in season, red tulips became a symbol of this resistance movement. But I think it's also, this idea of rebirth, renewal, restart, and so on.
And why your decision to print it on a paravent and for that show?
I really always wanted to try to make a paravan, to kind of break up an image into. I was thinking of it more like film stills, like a moving film still, and the space was so huge that we discussed a lot of options actually here, and there were a lot of regulations. We couldn't touch the wall, we couldn't drill into the wall, and sometimes limitations push you into something new. And I had just been experimenting with dye sublimation printing, which is this industrial technique of kind of putting inks into metal through heat. And in Netherlands, they have this huge advertisement industry. So we did it there with these industrial printers.
And how can you speak a bit more about the technicalities of the dye sublimation print? Like, how does it work, and what is like?
From what I understand, it's somehow the inks are heated, and almost like, I don't know, somehow injected into the metal. So this paravan stood outside for over a year, withstood like wind, snow, That panel was interesting, the art forum panel, because longevity is not something I'm very concerned about. I'm, I would say, fairly younger than other artists who were on that. I didn't have to be so concerned about my legacy. So I also like this ephemeral quality of photography. I like that it breaks down. I like that it's fragile. So my interest in this wasn't necessarily that it's kind of indestructible, that just kind of happened. And in this show here at Molitor, it's a combination of these kind of prints and analog prints, which I think is also interesting in terms of like fragility and resilience. And
yeah, and I think also in particular with the Van Abbe show, that since you're drawing on material that is also very politically charged, then also to think about like something that's really resilient as well, I guess, in its materiality.
Yeah, that's an interesting connection.
Or something else.
I also said something about the paravan that I had not thought about, because I was saying that for me photography is so much about hiding as well as revealing, because you kind of reveal something by doing a frame of reality. So what you leave out tells you about what you are kind of displaying, or what you're displaying points to things that are outside the frame. And then yesterday you said, well, that's kind of what a paravan is, and I never really thought about that before.
That's what curators do. But I think that is like a really interesting aspect of it. I feel like the paravan really, it's like supposed to hide something, but actually it's also drawing attention to it even more so. And it also creates like something like very intriguing about like what is actually behind the paravan. It's also thinking about like division, how to like divide a room. And I think a frame, like in photography, does the same thing essentially. It's also like, yeah, taking choices about how to look at something. Yeah.
And the back of this kind of had this very industrial like stand, like bracket. So it was kind of almost like a film set. Like the front was very seductive and the back was just kind of like revealing the means of production kind of.
Yeah, I think here you can see it a bit, yeah.
Yeah, you see a little bit.
Yeah. And here as well, here's another view. And I will quickly continue with another show. That's actually a show that was just mentioned in the introduction, which is Ketuta's exhibition that she had at the Kunstverein Braunschweig, which was last year, this year?
Yeah, last year, a year ago.
And I think something that's really beautiful here is that here you also respond to this space in a very specific way. I know the Kunstverein Braunschweig quite well. I've seen many shows there, and I know that it's an historical building. It's very difficult to drill inside historical walls. So there you also decided to go for something that, instead of like working against the architecture, really embraces it. So you decided to produce these curtains, and I was wondering, yeah, how did you develop this exhibition?
Yeah, in this room and in the next room, which I think is the next slide, you weren't really allowed. It's just what do you call it? It's protected, so you couldn't really engage so much with it. And I saw this kind of incredible show someone recommended that Isa Genskin did at Braunschweig, and of course it was like opposite. It was like really minimal, almost brutalist kind of, yeah. Collage, I don't know, but it looked beautiful in this Baroque space. And I kind of went into another direction. I thought, I'm going to embrace the ornament, I'm going to embrace the Baroque, I'm going to go all for kind of like decoration to a point where it's like suffocating you. So this room is called Flooding the Zone, kind of from, you know, like media flooding you, but it was this idea of like flooding you by saccharin so much that maybe you almost get like vertigo. That was, and what we did is we built a structure that imitated the room, so it's kind of an imprint of the room. So it's a freestanding metal structure with textile that can theoretically be exhibited somewhere else and will have the space of that room. So in a way, it's a record of that room also, like in a way a photograph.
It's like retracing the room, yeah.
And the motifs were all made from napkins that I collected in Georgia. That summer, probably most of them produced in China, but these very kind of kitschy, archetypal, like decorative elements like roses and swans and so on.
And I guess also by, you know, using like something like a napkin that is like very ordinary, you know, it's like also something that's like made to be basically just like, you know, used or perhaps even like discarded or thrown away or like being washed and all of this, and actually like paying attention to that and giving it space, exposing it.
Kind of trash, you just get rid of it.
Yeah, and by creating these curtains, you actually were also giving it more importance than perhaps would have been given to them otherwise, I imagine. And recycling. And I think something that's very interesting about the curtains, and it's also something we spoke about yesterday, is how they also are a veil. So on the one hand, they cover the space, but they also, I think, like, you know, also what they really show is like the light. And I think this is sometimes in architecture, when you like visit a building, you know, you become so aware of like its infrastructure and all of that, but you don't really like look at the light. And I feel like that exhibition is like something you also like really. You were really drawn to the fact how much light comes through. And I think this, for me, also creates a connection with photography again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, photography, you're basically working with light. You're kind of painting with light, in a sense. And in the camera-free photos, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm kind of tracing the photograph with my hand, which that has a little light in it. So, and you're dealing with time, right? You have like the f-stop, how long the thing is open, and how much time you're letting in. So, but with the textiles and this kind of veil-like quality, I really like that they're present. they kind of have an image, but they're almost non-present. They're almost not there. They're not really sewn, they're not finished, they're transparent, and they kind of hint towards something behind them. And the show was also called There But Not.
And I was wondering, perhaps you can speak more about like the camera-free photography. So, because I feel like perhaps not so evident to everybody here how you work. You were just describing that you have like little light in your hand, retracing, but it's like also it's, we work a lot with like photograms as well. Yeah,
it's kind of like a photogram. Like a traditional photogram is done on analog paper in the darkroom. So you go in the darkroom and you lay things on the paper. And these camera-free photos, I started making them when I was pregnant, strangely, with my daughter, because I felt like her move and this kind of invisible thing happening that I couldn't see. And by kind of work, so how I make these photos is I darken my darkroom. It becomes almost like a camera. I have prepared images that I either found or I collaged, or objects. And I place them directly on this negative. And I have little lights, little LED lights that are like finger lights. And I expose it with the light. So you can often see the trace of my hand in the image. And it's like a photograph of something that no one, I haven't even seen. You know, it's a photograph of a moment that's only recorded on that negative in that second, kind of. And when I started doing them 10 years ago, I would say it would be 70%, 80% total improv, 20% control, and it's slowly grown to being like 80% control, 20% improv, which is interesting. But there's just something also nice about stretching time like that, working in the dark, having to bring it in the lab, like this way of slowing down that I wanted to go back to by going back to analog. During COVID was also about kind of having time slow down. And also when I photograph with this large format camera in my studio, it forces me to slow down. It takes a long time to set up the shot, like millimeter here, millimeter. You know, I almost go into like a trance with the object that I'm photographing. And it's just almost like meditative for me. Yeah. I mean, I went on a tangent, but I hope I explained.
No, I think it's highly fascinating. And I think what you just mentioned about the fact that you started off by like 20% improv and 80% control, and how this also shifts. I mean, I guess it's like similar to like learning a language, and also like understanding, like, you know, with every, you know, the more you speak it, like the more your vocabulary grows, you get the grammar right, and then at some point you're also like able to like build sentences that actually make sense. All of that, and I imagine it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
But I think there's one part that I find really interesting about your work is also, even if there's like, you know, there's very controlled moments, I feel like chance always gets in. And there's also, if you see a lot of your prints, there's often you would see marks on them, like, you know, even like the Kodak frame, and so you're also not somebody who like wants, you know, to like crop them in any way, or like, you know, or retouch them.
Yeah, I'm anti-OCD. I really want to let things happen, and sometimes I feel like things are meant to happen. So I think if you create a controlled environment within which mistakes can happen or things can happen, it's fascinating for me. I once did a really conceptual project. I had an idea of what to photograph, and I made kind of like 15 images of the same thing. And by like third image, I really couldn't even get myself to the studio. It was just not something I was interested in this kind of indexical quality of the medium. I realized I needed to be kind of unpredictable to a certain level for me to have the desire to like engage with it, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think something that I've also, when, you know, reading about your work here and there and different occasions, also like there is a painterly quality to it that like being described by many when they see your work, you know, going between something between figuration and abstraction. So I feel like what you're describing, this intuitive process and letting chance get in and like, or let yourself be driven by something that's not only just control, I think is kind of similar, I guess. Yeah.
It's true. I didn't think about that. I think the painterly quality is also because I look at a lot of painting. I'm married to a painter, and I look at a lot of painting, but that is true. It is a similar process, yeah.
And now we're going to look at a project that is it is a bit more controlled because of the fact that it's happening also in a setting that I think also requires a bit more control. But this is a commission that you did for a subway station in Georgia, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's this kind of public art fund copy, like in New York. You have this in Georgia, and they had this idea to do projects in public spaces for the public. It's a little bit controversial because it was funded by the mayor of Tbilisi, and this government kind of turned out to be completely pro-Russian and autocratic. But at the time, I thought it's kind of nice to do something that's accessible and to engage with this building. It's funny, it looks very similar to the Neue National Gallery. And I had done...
We can pretend that it is
the Neue National Gallery. Yeah, we can pretend that it was here. But I had just done this project for Arles, for the photo festival, where I collected plastic bags that were given out in tourist shops in Georgia. So tourism exploded in Georgia, and when you went into these tourist shops, they would always put the gift in these kind of anonymous plastic bags that had traditional Georgian ornaments on them, taken from mostly Byzantine churches. And it was such a strange self-commodification. And I also, whenever I do a show in Georgia, I always think about what does kind of contemporary art mean in Georgia, because during Soviet Union it was quite close to contemporary art. And if you ask a random Georgian, they will always tell you, oh, it's the architecture of the Byzantine churches, it's the icons, it's the... So it was just this interesting translation into kind of tourism and kind of low-end plastic bags. And so I made these camera-free, but also images with a camera of these bags, and I thought it would fit to kind of do them there. And then I was talking to a controller who works there and sells tickets, and she was saying, why did you leave those few of the windows open? It's so great. It totally protects us from the sun. We love it, you know?
Yeah, and there again, of course, I imagine that also, I mean, you see it a bit also in the picture, that it also really changes the light in the space as well. So it does have also a real impact on the people who work there or pass through. And I guess this, what I really like about this project is that this idea of passage. So it's a subway station, and then of course, it's just a place of transition. People move through it, and actually it's the same what also happens with the light, you know, throughout the day, the sun moves, and so also different images will be illuminated or not.
And I the thing about photography that I also love is how it can change with context. So here we use people who make who print for advertisements, and we worked with that team and we use that technology, and it's completely different from when I do a show at Molitor and I work with GoLab or. You know, and they're kind of these incredibly high quality prints. So to kind of go in this very disposable kind of lo-fi direction is also interesting to me. And they faded also over time, which was also kind of beautiful. Yeah.
And how about because of course the audience will probably have noticed by now that a lot of your motifs also have to do with Georgia, and so I was wondering, whenever you start a project, how do you do you work with an archive? When you just said that you collected these these plastic bags, how can one envision your working process?
I don't understand it myself. I'm kind of a hoarder, unfortunately for my family. I'm a hoarder. I collect everything. I don't throw out anything. And in my studio, I refuse to clean or throw things out. It's where I don't have to be domestic. So things accumulate, and kind of good books, things find me at the right time. You know, you'll buy books and then you're going through something and suddenly that book, you're oh, I bought this a year ago, but I'm meant to read it now, and it makes sense, and that's kind of how it works. It's hard for me to explain. It's very spontaneous.
Yeah.
But I think the Georgia theme really started because I started working with Lisa Offerman from Alexi-Meskhishvili, which is my gallery in Georgia. And it was the first time I did an exhibition there. And that was the first time I kind of went back and started thinking about that context and that history. Yeah.
And probably also the importance to bring that history to geographies where we might not know so much about that history because of ignorance. Or
That's not my, I don't feel like that's my goal or agency, but it just happens. Yeah, it kind of naturally happens.
And do you feel like your work is being, what's the difference between your work being perceived in Georgia and in contrast to, let's say, in Berlin?
Well, today there were a lot of my kids' parents there who are from Germany, but they're in tech, and they were like, we don't understand any of this. Why don't you have like a little panel next to each photo explaining how you make it, you know? So I feel like it doesn't matter if it's Georgia or here. There are people who are interested in art or exposed to it and people who aren't. And it should speak to everyone on some level.
Yeah, I know. I think it does. I was wondering how these references, like for instance, like the tulips, you know, all of this.
Well, it's more obvious, obviously. The tulips, the ornaments are probably more obvious, but.
Yeah, and I think also perhaps continuing with that is a project. This is now that was also mentioned in the introduction that you did for the Kunsthalle Basel, which was also commissioned in public space, and was a series that Elena Filipovic did at the director of the time initiated, where she invited artists. I think it was up for a year. I'm not sure, but it was like an annual commission, where she invited artists to think of the space outside of the Kunsthalle. And for this, you also worked together again with I think like the advertising company to produce these. Yeah,
that was my first time, and I always wanted to work on this kind of an advertisement material, that porous kind of like banner material. So when she asked me to do something on the wall, I was immediately like, it makes sense, because to use that banner material and like use it in an institution or in a space is almost like too cool or pretentious. But here it made so much sense.
Also, it's resistant.
So it's resistant, yes.
And what are the motifs that we see here?
And so then I thought, you know, it has to kind of this is something that has to compete somehow with advertising, with like people's attention. And so I went into my archive and I came up with things that were most kind of like emojis or like really easily digestible, like archetypal things, like a smile and a nipple and a palm tree, you know. So. And if they would kind of catch your eye, you'd maybe take a look at them and spend more time with them and maybe see some other things in the image.
And actually, what you just mentioned, like seeing something different in the image, does this actually also happen to yourself when you look at your work? That like there's a moment where you see something and then you look at it years later, months later, weeks later, and something else happens to it?
Yeah, it happens, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that was so good. No?
No, because I also wonder, I think like annual commissions.
I mean, I learn a lot from my work. I feel like by working, I read this quote today on Instagram. It was like, I write because that's how I learn about what I think about things, or something like. The writer said it much better, but it was like, by writing, I understand what I think about things. And I feel like by photographing, I understand what I think about things.
Yeah, I can very much relate to that. I think that's the reason why I started to write about art, to make sense of it for myself, or to like find meaning in it. So yeah, I completely get that. Yeah, but I think also I was just in that particular case, I was wondering because it's also like an annual commission. So I feel like often our feelings also change over time, how we feel about like.
Okay, I see.
So I was also thinking, like in that particular case, rarely do artists have the chance to like revisit shows. You know, I mean, if they don't happen in their hometown or in the town that they're living in.
You're asking. I didn't understand that.
No, I think that was a brilliant answer. But no, but I was wondering if like with that particular show, if this, when like thinking about that it was up there for a year, if that changed something, how you looked at it, or also. Now we see like a tree that is also, I guess, changed throughout that process.
Yeah, it was interesting because the work really changed with the seasons because of the light. So when you had like sunlight and leaves, It was different than when you had kind of wind, and the wind would kind of make it more of a dynamic thing. So that was yeah, that was interesting. And the Wanabe thing was also up for almost a year, and for us it was like an endurance test, like what's going to happen to the image, but it held up.
And now I was already like guiding us to the next show, just because I feel like I need to be a bit aware of time. But these are now works that are currently presented at your show, which is also called Georgia, at Galerie Molitor, just basically around the block. And here we are, we were going through a lot of projects where you cannot actually see like a classical print, and here finally we see like a very classical like print framed, and I was wondering if you could guide us through the show.
So in this show, I think it's 10 photographs. They're all made camera free, and they are all made. The source images are from an Instagram account of a relative that I discovered I had in the fall. I didn't know. It's like a close relative, and through a DNA test, I discovered of her existence. And she happens to be like an influencer, so she has very seductive images of herself on Instagram. And I made all the work before I met her. And it was this kind of almost very gothic, like Victorian thing experience, which I think photography is very gothic and Victorian as a medium. You know, like from Barth saying it deals with death to, you know, freezing things in time that don't exist anymore and so on. And so I edited her Instagram feed. I printed out images from her feed onto like thin rice paper, and I made collages with them, and then I placed them onto film. And these are just totally analog prints, unprocessed otherwise, framed really classically. And then I also made dye sublimation prints, which are larger and are on metal. It was interesting to take these kind of very, you know, my feelings with this discovery were ambiguous. It's like you have very mixed emotions. It's like different things pulling you in different directions. And I wanted to have that ambiguity in the image, and I wanted to kind of break down that perfect image that she also presented of herself and make it mine. So while maybe she's the muse, there was this idea of kind of processing the image to a point of abstraction somehow.
Yeah. And I think actually while looking at the pictures of the show, I'm not going to touch this pointer again. I feel like it's cursed. But actually while looking at images of the show, what is interesting is that on the one hand, which you cannot see here, but you will see when you actually see the exhibition, is that these dye sublimation prints are actually also on a structure out of steel. It's like, so they have like braided legs, which is really beautiful. There's a real sculptural quality to these works, and what is really nice, and I was thinking about the exhibition a bit, and I was thinking actually it's very similar to like the different modes that you also have in a dark room, because there you also have like the container in which you actually like fill the water.
It's very true. I didn't think about that either. But actually how you first encounter the image in the darkroom is actually horizontal.
Exactly, yeah. And then like
either in this body of chemicals or when it comes out of the machine.
Yeah, and then that actually, like when you like put it on the wall, it's like how you're actually like hanging them to like actually then see the images, and also like for the work to dry.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that actually this exhibition is really reflective of photography, like the photographic processes itself.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the whole even finding out about her was very photographic, because she had a relationship to her parent from childhood only through photographs. So she presented herself through photographs, and I think it probably has to do with her becoming this kind of an influencer and like taking pictures of herself. She's also really beautiful, and it was this idea of communicating through photography, actually, the whole story. And that was fascinating to me also.
And also Instagram, of course, being a platform there, it's just like about like visuals and also like the exposure. And just like today, I was having a conversation about the fact that probably like in 10 years time or like 15 years time, we're all going to just be so ashamed of what we're doing.
It'll be like smoking, or I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be like smoking. But like I don't know, our children will tell us like, why did you expose so much of yourself? Why did you not, why were you not opaque? Why did you do that? And
I mean, my daughter, who's 14, and sometimes we have these videos on Facebook from when she was 2, right? Like 12 years ago. And I'll send it to her and she's like, is that public? Is that a public account? You know?
But it makes total sense. And I think what is interesting about Georgia, there's one picture where you can actually also see her in profile, even creating more attention for this work. But you can actually see like how she looks, how beautiful she is, and it's a beautiful work. But I really like these two settings where you see her a bit from further away, a bit closer, and I was thinking like it's also like you as like a distant relative, also like trying to like become closer to her as well, like and I think that's also what a photographer, like a traditional photographer, also does with their subjects that are in front of the camera, like also by taking photographs of them, also trying to create
a family album or something.
Yeah, like a family album, but also I feel more like even like a photographer trying to like by taking pictures of the subject, trying to like capture the subject, trying to like capture like the characters and what makes a good photograph or a good portrait, I should say, a portrait, and if it really reveals the personality of a person, and it feels like even though you did not take these pictures, you're just using them, it feels like with the way how you were working with the image that you also try to become a bit closer to Georgia.
I generally have a really hard time taking photographs of people. A lot of my photos, people are absent from my photographs, because I find it like such a charged thing to do. It's almost violent, and to say that you can take a portrait of someone is so, it's political almost, right? But in this way, I could just be working with images that she took of herself. And I think I was working through my experience and my feelings about her. They're not really about her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
But it was a way to work through the whole experience for me.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, I'm very of time, and I see already like a mic approaching the stage. So without further ado, I would be happy to open up the conversation for the audience. If there are any questions, remarks for Ketuta.
Thank you very much for the interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about the analog photo and Instagram is and now you take how I mean the question is how does the digital photo transforms into the analog? Is it possible, or could it also be the other way around, or how is the connection between the digital and the analog?
I feel like I grew up in this time where I grew up in an analog time, and then I ended up living in like a digital time. So I have like feet in both. So in a way it's important, and I feel really lucky because I have access to all these technologies, right? Analog, I don't fetishize any of them, but I would love to, I like translating them into each other. So I've also taken like analog photos of things off my screen, and then you have like the grain and the pixel like interacting with each other in the photo if you really blow it up, and it's kind of this nerdy thing I'm into. Generally my feeling is with digital you have so much information. It's just a lot of information, a lot of detail, and with analog it's far more reduced. Even if you print an analog print in the darkroom versus drum scanning it and printing the same image digitally, it's like two different images. And there's something mysterious about analog that it's not revealing everything that's there. It's leaving so much unsaid. So I like the contrast. But in this case, if it's a technical question, I just printed out, I just made screenshots of the Instagram posts and I printed them out on paper. And then I laid that paper onto analog film and exposed it with light so you see the movement of my hand, like for example here. And then I either scanned them and printed them digitally or analog. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Just very short question. How did your relative react to your photos?
Oh, of course, I asked her before I started.
Was she happy? I mean,
She was
it
really
good
happy.
Communication?
Yeah, she was really happy. She encouraged me. She was really happy. Sorry? She does repost them, yeah. And I've already given her a work, and but she wants to be a muse. Like that's her. She's an actress. So I think for her, it was a really interesting experience. And I told her, I showed her examples before. I'm like, it's not going to be one-to-one. I'm going to use your images, but I'm going to transform them a little bit.
Hi, Ketuta. Do you think you'll continue to make work about this relative, and do you think you'd ever do anything with writing about it, because it's such an incredible story, or something where she mirrors back to you, or is this over now?
I think the photographic work is over because it was important to me that it was done before I met her. I think it was really important that it was this imaginary thing, and I hadn't met her in real life. So it was this kind of muse, phantom, ghost from the past or whatever. But in terms of the screenplay, obviously initially I was like, someone has to write a screenplay about this and make a movie. And then I thought, well, I have to do what I know to do. Like, for me, the easiest way to work through it is to deal with it in a photographic way. But yes, maybe eventually you'll help me write it.
Okay, if there is no more question left, then I would just kindly invite you to go to Galerie Molitor today, tomorrow, next week, until the show is up. And also, of course, a warm invitation to also see Ketuta's upcoming exhibition at Kunsthalle Baden-Baden. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much.
Thank you.